Project recovery is a kind of beast that's different than average project development. As the slide says, it's a lot like landing on an aircraft carrier. Basically, your customer gives you a very, very expensive thing, puts you out all by yourself, gives you the impossible task of hitting an unknown target that's moving someplace in a barely known environment. And you still have to come in, well, safely. Every time you try, your time gets less, your fuel reserves become less, and at the end, it's pretty much live or die. Unlike most projects, once you go in to help somebody, we're in a unique position of saying we absolutely positively must deliver. There isn't halfway. If you picture being injured on the roadside and being picked up by an ambulance, you pretty much expect them to get all the way to the hospital. Halfway just isn't ever going to be good enough. So we see a lot of bad projects, and along the way, we meet a lot of leaders and managers. Just to sort of set a baseline, I wanted to kind of walk through how I define the two so you can decide which category you may or may not be in, and you might be in both. As a general rule, the two are separated largely by strategic and tactical goals. At the top, leaders will basically decide a broad goal for the whole organization. Sometimes those leaders are people who are deciding broad goals for the teams. Managers, however, are implementers, and we're supposed to go out and make it happen. It's up to them to decide what it is they need to specifically do along the way and make right and left-hand turns. The reason for the biggest differentiator between these two is that if leaders set these broad goals and turn around and try to manage to them, it can be very confusing for the team. Leaders set up high-level measures, but it's the managers who have to decide when those measures are running off the rails. It's important that people understand that the leaders are going to be the cheerleaders. These are the people who are going to stand on the side, tell the good news, reshape the messages. The managers, on the other hand, while they may be supportive, tend to be the ones who have to carry the bad news around. They're the ones who decide when to go in and take corrective action. They can be cheerleaders, but it's better for them to be participants and peers. At the end, it's really about doing the right thing. While the leaders are basically concerned with all the right things, it's the doing the part that the managers have to buy into. And while everybody strives to be effective, it's the managers who are looking to be efficient because as leaders, you're not as bound by your constraints. Managers, on the other hand, have a fixed budget, they have a fixed timeline, and they have to basically take whatever they have and turn it into the best they can possibly be. Interestingly enough, that's basically leaders and managers that are the core primary goal for fixing projects. The technical problems just don't seem to be as big an issue most of the time. There are a few truisms in this industry too. No matter what happens, people are good at doing what they know how to do. Many of you probably have seen the chaos reports that have come out over the years from the Standish Group. The chaos reports have come out every 2 or 3 years. One came out very recently. But as a general rule, we haven't gotten much better. Over the last 15 years or so of doing projects, we've actually gotten slightly worse in the last 3. But on average, about 70% of all these projects are failing. That means that most of the people who've been on projects over the last 10 years or so basically only know how to fail. In the end, what they've really done is to redefine success. They decided that it's successful to stay engaged on a project as opposed to delivery. And this is a bit of an epidemic in our industry. Unfortunately, once people get into the groove of this sort of successful failure, it's very hard to get them back out of it. What I have found to be incredibly useful is that people who do get that taste of blood in the water, who really want to do a good job and finally get the opportunity to do so, they become incredibly successful in a way that we would expect success to occur, real delivery of projects to people. It's a broad industry position right now that what we're doing is nearly impossible. The industry itself is barely 30 years old. And we're still working on problems that we don't understand, and we're still trying to solve them in new and unique ways every 6 to 9 months. We create new languages, we create new technologies, we create new methodologies. But people don't evolve as quickly as these ideas do. Instead, what we get are new ways of describing our failures. Capers-Jones, I consider to be one of the seminal thinkers in statistics for our industry at the moment. Capers came out and basically said, you know what, most projects of any reasonable size are late and they are over budget. And that's not an opinion. That was based on research of a large number of projects. But more interesting to this particular quote is not that they went wrong. It's that most of the people knew about the problems. And even knowing about the problems, they didn't manage to take corrective action. That's kind of the lead-in to this whole idea about sources of project failure. Most organizations really know what's going on and what needs to be done. But in the end, they largely don't believe that they can take control and actually make a change that's going to fix the environment. This is a bit of a view of a project. This is the way people usually see their options. The idea is that in the upper right-hand quadrant, we have the actionable and internally managed items. And at the beginning of most projects when I come on, they tell me the only thing we can do is work harder. That the scope has been predefined, the schedule is fixed, the current processes are what they are. They've been given budget and it's not going anywhere. Everything is somebody else's fault, except for how hard they work. And truly, they work really hard. But what's really interesting is if you get down to it, you'll find that it's not the only thing you can control. Some of them you can control more than others. But at the end of the day, you can control nearly everything. And when projects are really in trouble, it turns out the one thing you really can't change is the money. As a general rule, when somebody's hair is on fire, they're really open to the idea of change. And you can take advantage of this and get people to redefine their measures to maybe some more important measures, to revisit the scope and decide to look at what they really intended to build as opposed to the detailed requirements in place, and see if you can't trim some of the detail off to reduce the scope. The level of effort is still something you're going to have to pay attention to, and usually you can increase the level of effort somewhat, but becoming more effective with the level of effort generally is a more positive way forward. All of these things turn into some sets of patterns of failure. And the patterns basically fall into three categories: failing to manage scope, failing to manage people, and failing to manage processes. The key term there really isn't scope, people, and process, it's manage. It's the leaders of an organization and the managers of the individual projects at hand that tend to be key to both cause and resolving all these failures. Let's walk through these one at a time, starting with scope-related failures. One of my all-time favorites is unmanaged expectations. This is the chance when a project steps up, they look at a problem space and they say, you know what, this is easy. We've done it before. We can knock this out. Matter of fact, we've done it before and we can do it faster than we did last time. This unbounded optimism isn't a bad thing, but it's a terribly bad thing when it turns into unachievable goals. Everybody who's been a software for any period of time understands complexity is something that you discover along the way. As a general rule, no amount of requirements analysis has ever been able to ferret out everything prior to the actual undertaking. We look at these problems as we find them, and we have to be able to make changes. And if we make changes within our constraints, one of the things we don't want to be constrained by is a preset expectation, particularly a preset expectation that says it was going to be easy. A lot of people just can't get past the ego hit for having been caught wrong, and they refuse to stop saying it's easy. And it sets a tone within the team, and that is a manager's problem. The team knows the truth.